Hey everyone, so a year and 5 days ago I was diagnosed with familial adenomatous polyposis, and I thought now would be a good time to talk about the process of how I was diagnosed. And so I thought I would preface by saying that for the most part I was a relatively healthy kid with no major health issues, certainly no digestive tract issues, and I really didn't have a reason to suspect that I had a serious disease. And it wasn't until midway through my freshman year of college, so 2007, 2008, that I started noticing some minor digestive tract issues. My stool had become pretty liquidy and was consistently liquidy, but my frequency hadn't increased, and it really wasn't interfering with my daily life, so I didn't worry about it too much. I thought, maybe it might be related to my period or something. But then I do remember in between my junior and senior year, so the summer of 2010, I talked to my mom about the fact that my stool had been pretty liquidy for a few years now. Maybe once a month it might be more formed, but that was about it. And she suggested that I see a GI doctor, but my life got busy and I didn't end up seeing the doctor. But then in the beginning of my senior year, I did see an acupuncturist for my digestive tract issues, but of course that didn't really do anything. And then by the end of my senior year, I was becoming a bit more conscious of it. My frequency had increased a bit, the stool was still really liquidy, and I was having trouble fully emptying myself. And there's one particular embarrassing poop story that I think really made me realize that I should try and see someone. And so in the end of June, I made an appointment for a GI doctor, and I told him what was going on, and he did a rectal exam where, he stuck his fingers up and just, felt around my rectum, and then did a hemocold test where he took a stool sample and rubbed it on a special piece of cardboard, and that told him whether or not there was blood in my stool, and as it turned out there was blood in my stool. And so he consulted with me and said, that I might have celiac disease, and he thought maybe that we should do a colonoscopy and some blood work just to sort of see what's going on. But he made nothing seem like it was urgent. I actually couldn't end up getting a colonoscopy scheduled for another 2 months, and yeah, so again, I left it really feeling like there was nothing really major going on, although I do remember freaking out that I might have celiac disease because my diet is mostly carbohydrates, and now that just seems so silly now that I know what I have. But yeah, and then within the next few days, I started feeling really fatigued to the point where I couldn't move, and I spent the next few days in bed. And at the end of that week, the GI doctor called with the results of the blood work and said that my hemoglobin was severely low, and he advised that I admit myself to the ER. But of course, I was supposed to be going to New York that day to meet a friend from New Zealand, and I figured that I could admit myself into the ER any day, but how often would I get to see my friend from New Zealand? So I decided to go, but I was pretty miserable, which had nothing to do with my friend. I was just exhausted, and I ended up coming home early and spent the night at home, and then the next morning I went to the ER. And they ran a few tests, I think I had a CT with contrast and all sorts of other things, and they really couldn't find anything other than that I was anemic, and so they sent me home and told me to get some rest and drink some fluids. Although I will note that this is my first F.A.P. related loss because I left my childhood teddy bear in the ER room, and it's never been seen since, so that was a bit tragic. But anyway, the GI doctor decided to push up my colonoscopy. So after coming home from the ER, I had 2 days before my colonoscopy and just did, colonoscopy prep work, which involves a day of not eating and an evening full of lots of laxatives and lots of bathroom trips. So And then the morning of July 5th, 2011, I went in for a colonoscopy, and I really wasn't thinking anything was going to come of it. Any serious medical test I had ever had before never found anything, and I was sort of thinking this would go the same way. And the next part is a bit fuzzy because I was coming out of anesthesia, but I remember waking up and having the doctor tell me that they had found some polyps and they thought they knew what was causing it, but they couldn't be sure until they got some results back from the lab, so I should wait until Friday. And so yeah, I wasn't really thinking it was anything too serious. I was surprised that they'd found something, but I was really more focused on getting food in my body than what the doctor had said, and went home and took a nap, and when I woke up I remember there was something weird. My mom had been on the phone for, a while, and she came in and told me that if I did have this disease, I would need to get my colon removed, and I think at that point I started realizing that, this might be something sort of serious, and, I think I emailed my pre-med advisor and told I wasn't going to apply to med school that year because of medical issues, so, something hit me at that moment, but I think I was still in a bit of denial because I was telling myself that there was a possibility that I actually didn't have this disease. And then at some point I did a basic Google search of F.A.P. and pretty instantly realized that it was a very serious disease. And I called my friend at one point in the middle of the night and cried and everything. And so, it was definitely not a good period. But I tried to push it out of my mind as much as I could. And then Thursday night, the night before I was supposed to find out, I was playing a board game with a friend, and all of a sudden noticed that the mood in my house had changed. My parents were in the office researching things a lot, and it became pretty clear to me that they had found out what I had and that the news wasn't good, which turned out to be the case. They had heard from the GI doctor that I had F.A.P. and had set up an appointment for me to meet with him that Friday afternoon. And so I went in, and sure enough, the GI doctor told me I had F.A.P. and I needed to get my colon out, but once that was done, everything was going to be great. I was going to be as good as new, and I shouldn't worry. And he walked me down to the genetics counselor and patted me on the back, and that was the last time I'd seen him. And so I went in to the genetics counselor where I had blood drawn and to be sent to the lab so that they could find out what mutation I had. And the genetics counselor basically sat down with my family and I and did a genetics 101, basically, although I'd like to assume that was more for the benefit of my parents, since I tried to tell them that I majored in biology and had a little bit of a background in genetics, but anyway, and then they did, sort of a family history, all the way up to my great-grandparents, trying to find out any medical issues that anyone had, trying to see if there was any history of F.A.P. in the family, which it didn't look like there was. And then they went into their binder of genetics diseases and went to the F.A.P. page and went through some statistics about some of the extraclinic things related to F.A.P. But of course told me that there's a small chance of anything happening. I just needed to get my colon out and focus on that. And they mentioned fertility issues, but again said not to worry about that now. Small chance of anything being wrong and all of that stuff. And yeah, so that was that. And then a few weeks later, I believe I was in the hospital getting iron infusions, and the rookie genetics counselor tracked me down and told me that the blood work had come back and that I had the APC mutation, and she gave me a packet detailing the APC mutation and my past medical history and telling me about F.A.P. and things that I should be on the lookout for, and specific things about the location of my mutation, and then tried to ask me how I was feeling and things like that. And of course I just wanted to punch her in the face because this was the first moment that it really became official, that I realized that I really did have F.A.P. It was in my genes, because up until then I think I was still trying to tell myself that there's a chance that I didn't have this, but I think at that moment it really did become real, so I wasn't really in the mood to talk about it. But yeah, I mean, that was it. That's how I found out that I had F.A.P. I will definitely try and do a video talking about how I reacted to my F.A.P. diagnosis, which wasn't so bright and shiny and positive. But yeah, if you would like to share your diagnostic story, I'd be happy to hear it, just because, you know, an F.A.P. diagnosis is such a crucial thing, especially if you don't have a family history of F.A.P. So, yeah, I hope everyone is having an excellent July, and I will talk to you soon.